Hello everyone, in this video we're going to be going over directed graphs. Now so far we have only seen undirected graphs. So undirected graphs, if I'm starting at this node at the top and I want to go to another node, I can just traverse that edge to this node, and then if I want to go back to my original node, I can traverse this edge in the opposite direction to this original node. Now doing that, I can go both ways on this edge. In a directed graph, that's not necessarily possible. So in a directed graph is the same graph just with directions now. If I want to go from this node down to this node, that's fine because that is the way that that edge is directed, from here down to here. But if I want to come back, I can't because that's not the direction of this edge. I'm stuck here. I have to go find another way to get back to this node. Now there are going to be some edges, like this one, that go in both directions. That's fine in a directed graph, but when generally speaking, directed graph, you go from one node to the other and you may not be able to go back. In a directed graph, these edges are called arcs instead of edges. This doesn't matter all that much. It's a technical term that you may see later in the future, but don't worry about it all that much for right now. An arc is an edge that has direction, technically speaking. Now, let's talk about cycles in these directed graphs. So in an undirected graph, this is easily a cycle. You go from the top to the next and back, or you could go the opposite direction. In a directed graph, in the directed graph we saw before, we can still do this cycle. We can go from the top down to the next one, down to the next one, and then back up to the top node. And that works fine. We can't go the opposite direction, but we can go the first direction, so it's still considered a cycle. This cycle here, in an undirected graph, is fairly easy. In the directed graph, however, I start at this node, I go to the next node, great. I'm at the next node, I go to the next node, I get here fine, but then I can't get back up to the first node along this edge because this edge is going the wrong direction. This is an arc that is going in the wrong direction. I can't traverse it in the opposite direction. And so this is no longer a cycle in this directed graph. All right, let's look at another one. Again, this is easily a cycle in the undirected graph. In the directed graph, take a minute and try to figure out if this is a cycle in the directed graph. So, assuming you have an answer now, and pause the video to give yourself time, this is still a cycle in this graph. So if I start here, I can traverse this edge, I can traverse this edge, and I can traverse this edge all fine. The fact that this is going both directions isn't going to mess me up here. So this graph actually had a lot of cycles in it. This is a cycle in the undirected graph. I go from just form this box. This is a fine cycle in this graph. In the directed graph, this looks like it's doing fine. Start here, go up, traverse here, but I can't get back to this original node along this edge, so it won't work in the directed graph for that specific cycle. And finally, here's a fairly large cycle in the undirected graph. If I start here, go up, then over, then over, then over, I can traverse this cycle as many times as I want. In the directed graph, we can start here, go down, go over, and we have nowhere to go starting here. So the longest path we could take is this, but we can't ever get back to this node. So this is no longer a cycle in the directed graph. So those have been some examples of directed graphs and how they may change. The properties of the graph may change, not just like the cycles may change, not just because you can't go through here anymore, but that might change what the cycle, if the cycle exists, on a graph. So directed graphs, and go look at that worksheet, and I will see you in the next video.